Sergei Lavrov went to Brazil for a BRICS meeting and was point blank asked about the terms that they're willing to negotiate through.
The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has listed terms, telling a Brazilian newspaper that international recognition of Crimea and 4 other eastern Ukrainian regions annexed by Russia is imperative. Demilitarizing Ukraine, lifting sanctions on Russia, cancelling arrest warrants, and unfreezing Russian assets in the West are also on the agenda, Lavrov added, while Russia will insist on security guarantees to shield it from NATO and European Union threats.
For some reason, when the guy read that, he left off the denazification point, which is a major point for the Russian side and in that article. And let's just understand the gravity of that and how difficult of an ask that is for the Ukraine side and for Europeans. Not as big of a problem for the United States for reasons I'll get to in a second. But for Ukraine, they have to agree through negotiations that they're going to withdraw from all of the 4 territories many of which they currently possess. And we're talking hundreds of square kilometers that they have of these, especially the 3 southern of those territories. That their military will not just have to withdraw from those areas, but that they will then have to demilitarize. That means leave the service. So there's, between who you want to listen to, 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 Ukrainian soldiers that are still on active duty. And apparently from one of the earlier drafts from the Russian side, they said that'll have to come down to about 85,000, maybe 100,000, like that. Basically a self-defense force, and not even that. It's a really small. That's the Russian side said the criteria is it can't be big enough to even threaten any kind of future action against any of the Russian areas that now in these 4 regions, or even the Russian speakers in other areas that will remain inside of Ukraine control under this deal if it was accepted. And the denazification. And that is probably the bigger one for Zelensky, because the Russians accuse the Ukrainians of having many Nazi regimes elements inside their actual government. You saw earlier this week, we showed you where I want to say it was on Sunday when Putin was addressing the clearance of the Kursk area. And he said this has set the conditions for our army to continue on to the complete defeat of the Kiev regime. And he has again reiterated this issue of denazification, and especially as they're getting close to the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Second World War on May 9th. He's really been hitting that denazification issue really hard, which says the defeat of the current regime, as he calls it, in Kiev. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in there. So the question is, can Trump, can Europe, can Zelensky have the leverage to compel Russia to back off of any of those absolutely maximalist objectives? Now, as I've argued many times, the answer is militarily, economically, industrially, the answer is no. There just isn't. And unless you want to go with the West, full-on war with Russia, in a vain attempt to try to push this back, there is no leverage. And that's only marginal leverage, because then you have the chance for escalation. You have the chance for the war to go nuclear. And even if it stayed conventional, all of the advantages go to Russia. They have a force that's bigger than all of NATO combined. I mean, the biggest army on the continent, I think, is the Poles at 200,000. France is about 180,000. I don't know what the actual number is in UK, but in terms of combat power, they have one undersized mechanized division that I'm aware of, an armored division that has no combat experience at all. None of these guys do at all. And Russia is as far from scared about any of that as you can imagine. In fact, the morale is just almost through the roof anywhere you want to look. I mean, all over the place, whether Telegram channels, official media, anywhere you want to look, and for good reason, because they continue to win on the battlefield. So it's clear why they're saying this. So the question is, if you don't have economic, military, or industrial leverage, then what are you left with? And that's where we are right now, is that Zelensky is faced with this decision to where either he effectively surrenders. So I've heard some people say, well, these terms that they're asking for are basically surrender, and they're not wrong. That is what they're asking for. They're using diplomatic niceties and stuff, but in terms of what they're asking for, it is flat out surrender. You either surrender to all of our terms, or we keep going. And again, that's another consistent message. And now that puts Trump in an awkward position. Where's he going to go with this? Because if he just says, okay, that's it, we're going to walk, which is still the best thing to do, then he comes out looking like, well, you said you came into office saying you were going to have this resolved before you even got into office. And then I know how all these people think. I'll get Zelensky, I'll get Putin together. We'll have this done in a day. And then now it was 100 days. Now then that's passed, and it's an open-ended situation. So he's going to be faced with saying, okay, you made all these big promises and you kept none of them. I mean, you could have walked away on day one and had this same outcome. But if he goes back on it, if this little trickle of $50 million turns out to be the first of more, that he says, okay, well, Russia, if you're not going to do it, we say that we're going to go to this other path. Now then he bought it. He doesn't even have even a fig leaf to cover to say this was not my war. It will be his, because he'll be basically opening the spigots back up. And he won't have any more success than the previous administration had if he's tempted to do that. And I don't know, according to what Gary showed there on the screen from the Truth Social, it's going to be Marco Rubio. And believe me, Marco Rubio is not the guy you want to be talking to when you're making decisions about war and peace, because his knowledge of the military and the international relations issues is far, it's even less, I think, than Mike Waltz was. Mike Waltz at least had combat experience, and he was in the military. Rubio has none, as far as I know. But in any case, what he said is not indicated a lot of confidence in that. So somebody in the Trump administration needs to be very clear and just, I mean, metal on metal truth and honest, and say there's no path here. Opening these spigots back up will just put all of the onus on you, because then they'll say that, then he'll come under even more criticism, because they'll say you didn't authorize anything new, and you drug this out a long time, and then now you want to turn the spigot back on. So you've lost, over 100 days of things you could have done if you'd have just kept on with the policies. Because remember, the Democrats left basically a ticking bomb for him diplomatically and politically, when you had the outgoing Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense both saying, we've left this in a good shape. We got things going in a good place. We have these billions of dollars we just shipped out the door right before they left office, and Ukraine is in a position where it can stand on. You remember all that nonsense they said? It was no truth to it whatsoever. But politically, a lot of those words land on people who don't have independent knowledge of it, and will definitely be dusted back out if Trump tries to go down this other path, because they'll say, look, we handed it to you and you blew it. And so he's in a really tough spot right now, because either direction there is going to take heat. So it's much better to say, okay, I'm just cut this off right here. I mean, the best thing for him politically is to just pull the plug right now. I mean, don't wait till May 9th. Don't wait to find out what happens with these negotiations. Just make the call and move out with aggressiveness and confidence. This is it. Like Susie Wall said, if the two sides don't want peace, there's nothing I can do to force them. We have concluded that it's time to walk. And all the criticisms that I mentioned will certainly come flowing in. There's no question about that. So you can't avoid that at this point. You can't avoid the military outcome that Ukraine is going to lose at this point. You can't do it. But what you can do is, by withdrawing now, then you take even the fig leaf away psychologically from the Ukraine side. And instead of the West saying, yes, we'll jump all over it and start giving more weapons, which will drag out the end and increase the cost to Ukraine, they will be forced to capitulate then and sue for whatever terms of peace they can get, because they just won't have the ammunition, the weapons, the training, anything else. It's not enough from what the Ukraine can do on their own, plus the Europeans. They simply don't have the capacity. So in this ugly situation, I think we're down to a situation where it's really that stark. Trump's areas of negotiations and maneuver room are shrinking by the day, and he's going to have to make a decision one way or the other pretty soon, or it'll be made for him. A couple of other things I want to look at today here, and that is on some of the related issues. Europe itself is not exactly a unified bloc, and even within the European Union, there's starting to be a little bit more pushback on what the EU is doing, and there's growing dissatisfaction with the leadership of Ursula von der Leyen, with Kaja Kallas, and that's being headlined, of course, by Robert Fico of Slovakia and Viktor Orban from Hungary. And earlier today, there was a video released from Robert Fico. I think the video was made yesterday, where he's talking about, hey, listen, in addition to us both saying we think that the war in Ukraine should come to an immediate end and on the best terms we can get. He also fired a shot across the bow to the EU itself.
As I stand here, I repeat once again, as the President of the Government of the Slovak Republic, I will never agree that anyone in the European Union should be punished for his sovereign position. I will never agree with any procedures that would lead to the punishment of those who do exactly what they promised their own voters, who act sovereignly, and who defend their own national interests. This is a position that the Slovak Republic will never abandon.
So, listen, he said a lot of that issue that sprang from when Kaja Kallas gave a veiled warning to any European leader that had the thought of going to Moscow to celebrate the May 9th victory celebration on the 80th anniversary of the victory of World War II. And we've shown you that before, where he fired back pretty directly on that, of saying, listen, I went to Normandy. I've gone to Arlington Cemetery in the United States. I thank the Great Britain for what they did to help Slovakia. And we would be remiss if we didn't do the same to the Soviet Union, which helped to liberate our country. We're going to honor all of those, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. And so now he's in reinforcing that here, along with Viktor Orban, who both said, listen, we should not get into a situation to where the European Union is basically telling all of us to be silent. Like no nation has its own voice anymore. He said there was, I think the number is 27 members of the EU, and there are 27 different interests that are involved. And we don't check our national sovereignty at the door when we become part of the European Union. And listen, the more that the EU leaders try to clamp down on recalcitrant folks like this, the more they go down policies that can't succeed, the more other countries are going to start looking around and going, we keep following this path here, then I think, as Patrick Bob said earlier on one of our shows earlier today, that other people may start going the way of the UK.